Today you'll learn about how to write letters to elected officials, which is one way that writing can be a form of civic engagement. You will learn how to identify who your elected officials are and find their contact information, conduct any research necessary to support your points using library and online resources, and learn how to write a letter to an elected official that follows letter writing etiquette. Before we get too far, why should you contact your elected officials? A 2017 New Yorker article, What Calling Congress Achieves, explains that contacting your representatives is a constitutional right guaranteed by the First Amendment. There are many ways to petition government for a redress of grievances, like protesting in person, like marches on Washington, signing petitions, making phone calls, or sending letters, emails, or faxes. Some legislators take communicating with constituents more seriously than others, but most offices function similarly. According to Bradford Fitch, the president of Congressional Management Foundation, a nonpartisan nonprofit group that works to improve the efficacy of interactions between citizens and lawmakers, communicating with constituents accounts for 20 to 30% of the budget for every congressional office on Capitol Hill. Most of this communicating is done by staff assistants or interns who are often college students or recent graduates. Regardless of the method of communication, every call, voicemail, letter, email, or other type of communication is listened to or read and entered into a software program known as the Constituent Management System. Some forms of communication are more effective than others, but the effectiveness is based more on the context of the situation than the medium. Phone calls are better for mass protests because they take up more time and they obstruct business as usual, and they often attract media attention too. Emails are fast and easier for staffers to process, and mailed letters take time to arrive, and once they arrive, they're tested and decontaminated to protect employees from mail bombs and toxins. Then the letter is scanned and forwarded to the congressional office as an electronic image. Communications that carry less weight include anything that comes from outside a legislator's district or state. Tweets and Facebook posts carry less weight because it's hard to verify if they come from constituents. Online petitions because they require so little effort to sign that they aren't seen as meaningful. Mass emails that originate from advocacy groups' websites since they require so little effort and that some staffers wonder if they're sent with the constituents' knowledge. And phone calls that follow advocacy organization scripts also don't carry as much weight, especially if the caller doesn't seem informed about the issues if asked questions that go off script. When constituents communicate with elected officials, there are usually two reasons why. They're having a problem and they want their representative to solve it, or they want to share political preferences that they want their representative to act on. Contacting elected officials for help solving a problem is often effective. Representatives might not be aware of issues that affect constituents' daily lives, and once they are aware of them, they might write bills that address these topics. This is an important role that average citizens play in the legislative process. For example, constituents first began writing to their representatives about the opioid crisis, which made representatives aware of the problem so they could begin taking steps to address it. Asking your representative to vote a certain way on divisive issues is less likely to be effective. There are rare cases when constituents have swayed their representative's vote, but it's unlikely. Representatives do listen to these types of calls and take them seriously, but representatives are elected based on the values and ideals they campaigned on, and those values and ideals will inform how they vote, even if some constituents disagree. It should be difficult for an average citizen to influence a lawmaker's vote. Lawmakers have access to information that the rest of us don't have, and that influences their decisions. Therefore, it's often more useful to ask why they voted a certain way than asking how they voted. That being said, sometimes constituents do sway their representatives' votes. There is talk of repealing the Affordable Health Care Act every once in a while, but it hasn't happened yet, because constituents tell their representatives about how they use it and what would happen to them if it were taken away. Enough people support this legislation that very little progress has been made to repeal it. Now that you know why you should contact your elected officials, Let's open the Civic Engagement LibGuide to learn how to contact them. Scan the QR code or go to cord.libguides.com/civic engagement to open the LibGuide and follow along. Click on the Writing to Legislators button on the left and then scroll down to Finding Your Legislators. You can contact your elected officials at any level of government, federal, state, or local. The sites listed here can help you find your elected officials at any level. Let's open the first link, LWV Find Your Elected Officials. And then we can search for the college's address, 901 8th Street South, zip code 56562. This site includes information on your elected officials from the president all the way down to city commissioners. Most include an address and phone number, or just a phone number, but once you know who your elected officials are, you can Google them to find their websites, which often include email addresses if you prefer to email them. OpenStates and USA.gov work similarly, but at the state and local government levels. Now that you know how to find your elected officials, scroll down until you get to the Becoming an Informed Constituent section. This section of the guide includes databases that you can consult to learn more about issues you may want to write to your elected officials about. I'm going to open CQ Researcher and search for immigration. And if it asks you to log in, just log in with your Concordia username and password. Most of these articles are fairly recent and include an introduction, background information, current situation, timeline, and more information about a topic on the left. This is a great way to get a sense of a complex issue quickly. Back at the LibGuide, I can click on the Legislation tab to learn more about legislation at the federal and state levels. I'm going to open congress.gov, but OpenStates works similarly, but at the state level. I can search up here in the search bar for topics or specific legislation. Down a little bit, we can see live videos of House and Senate hearings. And if we scroll down a little bit, either on the right-hand side over here or down a little bit, we can find information about current members of Congress. The last thing I want to show you under Becoming an Informed Constituent are two sites under the Voting and Voting Records Activities tab. So first open GovTrack and scroll down. You can either type in your address to find your representatives, or you can select an issue area that you care about to see legislation on those topics. I'm going to type in 901 8th Street South 56562, which is the college address. And I can click on the representatives listed to learn more about their track record. So as I scroll down, I can see how they compare in terms of ideology and leadership to other representatives. I can see what committees they're on and what legislation they've enacted. And I can also see their voting record and their votes. I especially appreciate that this particular site offers some context, so it's easier to interpret what this information means. So for example, I can see that she has enacted 60 pieces of legislation, and it says here, does 60 not sound like a lot? Very few bills are ever enacted, and most legislators only sponsor a handful that are signed into law. So she's actually probably pretty active in this area. Going back to the LibGuide, I also want to show you Project Vote Smart. You can either enter your address or a politician's name into the search box. I'm going to type in Amy Klobuchar and enter, and then I can select her name from the list below. Now that I've selected a politician, I can click on the folders to learn about her biography, her votes, her positions on different issues, ratings, speeches, and funding. And I find the votes and position sections especially helpful. So if I click there and scroll down, I can see how she voted on different topics or on different bills. And if I look at positions, it will list the official position, inferred position, or if the position on this topic is unknown. So this can be especially useful, like if you were writing about abortion legislation, for example. I could see that she's pro-choice. That might affect how I talk to her about this topic, knowing if she agrees or disagrees with me. Another section here that's useful is looking at funding. Sometimes it can be hard to see who's giving money to different politicians, but if I scroll down, I can see who some of the top contributors are, how much money they've donated, and sometimes knowing who is donating money to a campaign can also affect how somebody votes on something or what their position might be. Now we've spent a bit of time looking at sites that help you get to know your elected official and the topics that you might want to write about better. This is important because in order to write effectively, we need to be informed and we need to have a good sense of our audience and what arguments they might find convincing. Once you know what you're writing about and who you're writing to, check out the letter writing etiquette tips listed on the LibGuide. There are tips about keeping the letter brief, that address content, but there's also links below that share some formatting guidelines for letters as well. And Emily posts advice for addressing public officials can be very useful when deciding how to address somebody respectfully. Thank you for joining me to learn about how to use writing as a form of civic engagement to reach out to your elected officials. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to your library liaison. They're here to help you.